Hello, welcome to Philosophy, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega, Trix Slattery, WSD, Jamie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the WSD had to do his yeah, and we've got Yuri, and let's see, I think I mentioned everybody. And today the topic we're going to explore is the topic of an afterlife, and this has kind of been debated by philosophers, scientists, and religious people. Um, not only whether there's an afterlife after people die, do they live on, do they have a soul, but then there's disagreement on what afterlife people get, whether they're reincarnated into a cockroach or whether they go to heaven or hell, all of those fun debates. And I've been fascinated with this topic for years, and I want to bring up three questions that all of us on this podcast can explore. First, is it logically possible? Are there any contradictions, or is it something that could be true that we could live on after death? Second, is there empirical evidence for this? And third, would it change anything about your life if you did believe in an afterlife, or if you currently do? Say you stopped believing in an afterlife, would it change how you live at all? And some questions we can all explore. So, who would like to go first with what they think?
There's no Afterlife in the discussion.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here's is it logical? I don't think there's any scientific law of nature that prohibits it. I don't think. I think it is logical. Is there empirical evidence? I don't think so. All we have is anecdotal. But what changes? All right, I believe in an afterlife because it makes me feel good. Either we have an afterlife or we don't, right? The belief that we don't, to me, is just who's typing that in there? The belief that.
Yeah,
you hear that clicking? What's that clicking?
Yeah, it sounds like a bunch of clicking.
Jamie, what are you doing?
Mute the mic, Jamie. Right. Mute the mic.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it makes me feel good. In other words, we have no idea whether tomorrow's going to. Expecting tomorrow to come gives us something to look forward to, and in the same way, yeah, right. One might be completely wrong. Maybe like after we die, that's it forever and ever and ever. But it just seems like it feels good to believe, to look forward to it.
So so George just basically was saying he believes in afterlife because it makes him feel good to believe it.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good question. Should we believe things that make us feel good just because they make us feel good, or should we believe things because they have evidence for it?
That's a good question to explore right there, Trick.
Yeah, there might be a reason to believe something if it makes you feel good, if it doesn't harm other people. But I think when you believe something without evidence, then that kind of ties into your other beliefs as well. It kind of ties in your whole, I guess, epistemological standard. So at that point, you're kind of you're allowing in a non-rigorous account of something that you believe, basically, and that's problematic especially when it ties into other beliefs, I guess, that could be more harmful. So, for me, I think that
where's that music coming from?
I don't know. Yeah, that's weird. Who's playing music?
Hold on. There's some.
Wait a minute. Y'all get. Is it kind of technical music?
Yeah, we were hearing some kind of music.
I'm still hearing that. I had a little low.
Oh, it's from WSD's
that's
end.
Not coming from you. Oh, is it? WSD, mute your mic, dude.
So I don't think there's any logical problem with an afterlife. I agree with George. I don't think there's anything that contradicts necessarily an afterlife, but at the same time, there's no evidence for it, from what I can tell, and I think there's a lot of evidence against it. For example, we know that the brain is connected to our consciousness. We know that, for example, if we damage the brain, we damage a lot of our own self, basically. So we can forget our memories. We can have amnesia, and totally forget all of our memories. We could become a totally different person because of brain damage, basically. So who we once were is no longer, and we're now this other person that just because of brain damage. With split brain personalities, like when people have that split brain problem where they have to split the brain into two, you can have one side having a belief in
a split personality.
Theism. Well, not split personality, but when they have a split brain patient, which they actually have sever one half of the brain and the other half, you can have them having almost a split personality where one side believes in like atheism and the other one's a theist. So they've had this happen before. So, and it's because of the brain. So we know that the brain is interconnected with consciousness, and then it's more than that. We can turn off consciousness by using chemicals, obviously, like when we do under surgery. We can turn off brains. There's actually a certain switch that you could turn off physically in the brain to turn off consciousness. So we know that once the brain is gone, it seems like that there's no consciousness is going to keep going after that. At least that's where the evidence appears to me. So it's not just that we have no evidence. I think we have evidence against an afterlife as well.
Yeah.
So we can have multiple sort of afterlives based on the split brain experiment.
Yeah, well, you'd have to, right? You'd have to have some kind of, I guess, like the only way I could see like a real afterlife happening is somehow our brain, the configuration of our brain kind of is in a different comes solidified in some different form, some quantum form or something like that. So it kind of creates a reproduction of itself within some form that we're not aware of, at least scientifically as of yet. And if that's the case, then you're right. Then the split brain patient would be you'd have a split consciousness going into two different directions there, which would be really confusing.
I was being facetious, Trick.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's an interesting thing, because if there's different personalities, almost like different people within the same brain, then they would have to have separate afterlives somehow or something. Yeah. And yeah, see, I agree with what Trick said. It does seem like the things that make a person what we think of a person being is their memories, sort of. You know what I mean? It's all of their experiences up to the present moment, as well as their genetics, that makes them desire certain things, and their memories affect their behavior. So if they get amnesia or Alzheimer's or some other form of dementia, then the person's gone, even if there's a body there, if those memories are destroyed, because the person that we all know and love is gone for all intents and purposes. So it seems like if the consciousness is basically memory stored in the brain, then upon the destruction of the brain, then the person for sure is gone. That seems like that's how it seems to me anyway.
Well, you could argue just as easily that when somebody has dementia or whatever and loses their personality, that the consciousness is living on somewhere else and the body is just going through the motions. I'm having trouble with this discussion.
Huh.
Carry on.
What do you mean you're having trouble with it? What part are you?
I just don't believe in it. That's all. But I mean,
right. Neither do I. Right.
But then, like, ask yourself the question. Like, for example, from quantum mechanics, we know there's some really strange stuff that happens, in the universe. Just not even, time being relative, just like even like classical mechanics, whatever. The universe is. I mean, imagine, like, I just learned, which blew my mind, that I thought there were a couple 100 billion galaxies. Now, apparently, the standard understanding is that there's 2 trillion galaxies, right? And each with, a couple hundred or whatever stars in them. And, like, I mean, just consider that all that stuff was packed in the space of like, that the size of an atom. I mean, come on, like reality. I mean, that's one part of the reality makes, it defies our logic, our reasoning. There are other parts of reality that defy our logic and reasoning. For example, like this idea that time has always existed. And like, if there was a Big Bang that it expanded outward, what did it expand into? You know what I'm saying? Yes, as a scientist, I adhere to logic, but that's our most reliable tool for ascertaining the truth. But I also have to recognize that there's something within the universe, within reality, that transcends at least the logic we have.
Well, I mean, for us to even know anything, we can't transcend logic. I mean, you might say that there's something that transcends logic, but we couldn't even talk about anything that transcends logic. Logic is how we think and talk.
I mean, like that. I mean, like, for example, like if the universe expanded, right? From this Big Bang, what did it expand into? We're talking about, well, that's logic, but
why does it have to expand into something?
Because logic dictates that, it would have to. I mean,
why?
No.
Because what? All right, because
right.
like, all right, wait a minute. So like, it's expanding. When we think of anything in the world that expands, right? It expands into something else, right?
Yeah, because in the world we have things in the world that expands into, but for the Big Bang, when we're talking about the expansion, we're just talking about basically the planets moving away from each other. It's
Yeah, but I mean, again, like our standard view of reality is you move away into something else. It's like like Aristotle was asked, like what the universe is finite or infinite. He said, well, it's finite, and they asked him, well, what's on the other side? And he said nothing. I mean, like, no.
Oh man, that's sort of an interesting thing that I've thought about for a long time, because I really believe that there's no outer wall. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that you hit a wall when you go out too far. I think space is basically infinite, that you just never run out of space. So, but yeah. So anyway, about the afterlife thing though, is like my position on it is kind of like I can't even make sense of the idea anymore, because it seems to me that in order for there to be a person, like after I'm dead, for there to still be a Chandler Klebs, there has to be somebody with the exact same desires, exact same memories, exact same behavior that acts in every way like me. And if that person is changed in any way to where they're no longer like I am, then they're not truly me. Therefore, that means that I am gone, even if there's some other look-alike clone. And I wouldn't want you to be fooled thinking that was me, because it wasn't.
Chandler, look at it this way. Before you, like, when you were an embryo, okay, or a fetus or whatever, like, there was like, you had no memories, no thoughts, no whatever. It was just your essential you, right? And then you developed all this, you perceived stuff, you remembered it, all this stuff. So it could be that we have an essential self that, yeah, I mean, like, I would hope, if we do have a afterlife, I hope it's not the way we are now, because I'm looking forward to like blissing out in it.
So maybe it'd be an improvement to the way we are now.
What do you mean by an essential self? Because I don't even think like self is kind of it's kind of an illusion, or at least it's something that is just something that evolves as you go along. There's no real sense. I mean, like you're saying that an embryo has the self in it, but what we consider the self is really our conscious thoughts at any given moment, and then that changes from one moment to the next, to the next, to the next. So it's not really a consistent self. So
I agree with you. But like before those inconsistencies, before it develops its first perception, its first memory, and all, it just exists as this self with this tabula rasa kind of stuff, like the blank slate. That just like it's a being without any experience.
Yeah, but would you call that a self? Would you call the atoms that before it even configures into an embryo a self? The obviously, all the atoms in the universe always
Conception.
exist.
Death is a little bit like before conception.
Right. Before conception. So at what point do you draw the line, I guess?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I would think the moment before our first experience, our first cognition, our first feeling, whatever sensation, perception, whatever it is,
right.
Then I think that could be the essential self. And who knows what came before that? You're right. Who knows when it developed, when it started?
Well, why wouldn't it be at the time of perception? That's where a sense of self happens, I guess, when you're actually perceiving things. There's no, there isn't something that is a self. It's just a sense of self, right?
Well, it could be. You're right. It could be, in other words, you could just define the self as the moment the self becomes aware that then it becomes a self, and maybe the first awareness is that it's a self. Who knows? Who knows what it's aware of initially?
Yeah, this gets really interesting and deep, people, because the concept of the self is one where I'm still a little confused, because on one hand I believe the self to be an illusion, because I don't, partly because I don't believe that there's anything new about us, because I don't believe in free will. I don't think there's anything that is me that isn't caused by something else that came before me. So it's sort of like I think of the self only as being the observer, only that the self just observes. The consciousness is the self, but that consciousness is I'll sound like George when I say this, but it's just the consciousness of the universe. But it's not my consciousness, if that makes sense.
Right, but it's the consciousness of a specific structure of the universe, which is usually in brains. And I guess this is where me and George kind of have our disagreements, because he tends to think that consciousness is something outside of brains, right, George? Like it's not necessary.
Well,
it's in brains too, but it's also something beyond that, I guess.
Yeah, I think the most direct way I come to that is when I have to consider, for example, as intelligent as we are as human beings, whatever created our human brain, it's got to be vastly more intelligent. And I can't conceive of an intelligence existing without a consciousness to which it's attached.
Right. So this gets into evolution. I think evolution is a dumb process that has no teleology to it, no consciousness basically that makes it happen. It just arises and then. Yeah,
but is that scientific that it just happens? Do things just happen?
That's what the theory is about. The evolutionary theory is it shows that there's no need for something to have created it. Basically, it's just causal. It's just a causal process of physics, basically.
Yeah, but science, I think our basic, causal understanding is things don't just happen. We may be ignorant of why they happen, but I'm not sure.
They don't happen for a conscious reason, though. They happen for a causal reason, which is different than a conscious reason. So a rock rolling down a hill doesn't happen unless someone pushes it. If a rock just rolls down a hill because it comes apart from a mountain and falls, that doesn't happen because of some conscious reason. It happens because of physics and gravity and the weather or whatnot. But
right, but then when we're talking about something that we would define as intelligent, like the creation of a human brain, then I think that's a different case.
The evolution of a human brain. So evolutionary theory is no different. It's just a causal process that step by step leads up to this complex brain, basically.
But can you see, for example, I can't, we started talking about things that we can't fathom. They seem to be illogical. I can't see how, just quote unquote randomly or without any plan or purpose or design, whatever you want to call it, a brain just comes together. You know, a human brain, it just evolves. You know, however many, billions of years or millions of years, whatever it took.
Well, what do you? I mean, I don't understand why you don't understand. Like, when you have something that, okay, so understand? Do you think that a reproducing cell needs some kind of intelligence for it to be able to reproduce? I guess.
I think so, because the act of reproduction is like a purposeful act. You know, it's like it's doing something intentionally.
I'm just talking about chemical splitting, basically. So when you have like this configuration of chemicals and they split into two, and then those split into two, and so on and so forth, there's no conscious act needed for that. And that's all you need to have this evolutionary ball rolling, basically, is a reproducing molecule. So it's just a molecule that reproduces, that doesn't procreate, it reproduces. It just a chemical process that goes from 1 to 2 to 2 to 4 and so on.
But it doesn't just reproduce. For example, it's programmed to want to procreate, to survive. It's procreate.
No. There's no wanting to procreate. Go ahead.
Well, at a certain level, organisms are.
What do you have to say, Yuri?
Basically, evolution is three things. Replicates. The replicates are imperfect. And the third one sort of slipped my mind. And the environment shapes which replicates are going to be successful. Those are the three things that you need for evolution. But George, just going back to your argument, I would be careful. Just arguing from I don't understand, therefore, it's not a good argument. I'm sorry.
What am I using as for? I don't understand.
Are you saying I can't see how chance or whatever sort of allows intelligence or sentience, or therefore there has to be some sort of universal intelligence?
Yeah, but that is kind of like, there's some echoing. I don't know if everybody else hears that also.
Yeah, I've been hearing that too, and I don't know where it's coming from.
Is that your mic, Yuri?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it stopped now.
Yeah,
all right, but Yuri, but like this kind of makes sense-ishness, whatever, underlies science. You know, there's a kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
What do you mean?
Yeah, but the thing with science is it takes, okay, a scientist might say, I don't understand how, but then they'll say, well, we'll test this possibility. And but then again, you're going right to the end possibility, which is a universal type intelligence.
No, I mean, like, my understanding of intelligence is like, we do intelligent things. We write, a book, or, we do something, we define it intelligent. We have criteria for defining it as intelligent. It has order, it has purpose, it has direction, it has, these various characteristics. Now, when you compare anything that we do, to our human brain, whatever we do is like, it doesn't come near, the intelligence that it would take to create a human brain. So that, it just seems like a certain kind of logic just seems to very strongly suggest that, basically.
You're using the language of create, George. Like, you're saying create a human brain as if something is creating it, which it's not really the case. I mean, it's just a causal process that leads to it. It's like how do you explain
this? Actually, I think I can explain this trick. When George uses the word create, like when he talks about creating a human brain, it sounds like you've got a carpenter or somebody who is like sits down at his workbench one day and says, you know what, I'm going to build a brain. That's the way it sounds when people use the word create. So I think that's what Trick's getting at.
But and like when we do anything intelligent, we're doing the same thing. We are creating something intelligent.
Well, when we do something purposeful,
if you disbelieve in free will, you'd be a little bit skeptical about that statement.
No, actually, it's because I don't believe in free will that I ascribe our intelligence to the universe.
But how can you ascribe intelligence to the universe when the universe can't have a free will?
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I mean, then we're going beyond logic. You're talking about the infinite regress, but beyond that, if we don't have a free will, if our thoughts aren't ours, then whatever our consciousness, our intelligence, all of our thoughts are not really ours.
Yeah, but you don't need free will to have consciousness or intelligence. So we can have, like, a brain can be intelligent. Because it's a processor, basically. It processes a certain way that's intelligent. Same thing with artificial intelligence. That specific processor is artificially intelligent. But it's that configuration itself that is. It's not the universe. I mean, we caused it. There's the causality led to that specific configuration. But that doesn't mean that the process has to be an intelligent process that leads to it, especially when it comes to biological brains that evolve, basically.
Well, again, I can't see another way around it, because, like, for example, if we're holding a puppet in our hand and we're making it do whatever we want to, we might ascribe intelligence to that puppet. It's like writing down, a poem or a thesis for us. But we know it's us who are making it, causing it do that. And how can we ascribe?
The universe doesn't want people. I mean, it's not like there's the universe going, let's make people do this. It just does it. The universe.
Wait a minute. Why would you say that? How could you know that, first of all?
Because there's no reason to believe it. There's no evidence.
There's no evidence to believe otherwise.
Consciousness existing other than in brains. So when we have this teleological idea that there's this thing out there that's saying, oh, let's put people out on this planet and give them consciousness, there's no evidence for that. There's no need for it, because we know the process.
The evidence is like it's either a planned actuality or it's random. And like, I can't fathom like how in a zillion years randomness could create a human brain.
When you say random, you mean causal, not random. So random, I mean, unless you mean random in the sense of causal randomness, like rolling a dice rather than through a causal.
Random is a really bad word.
Right.
I think what you really mean is chaotic.
Yes. All right. Well, but chaos
is completely causal.
Right.
Right. It is causal. So it's not. So it's what I mean is like, it's like causality without purpose. In other words, like, for example, with evolution, you have an organism, a life form that doesn't have wings, and then like a few 100 million years later, it has wings. And in the meantime, it has these nubs that have absolutely no purpose.
What's the purpose of an amoeba?
No, but I'm talking about like when I bring up the thing of a wing, it's like this took hundreds, probably of millions of years to develop, and within let's say, for example,
it took 10 billion years to create an amoeba. What's the purpose of an amoeba?
No, we're using purpose in different ways. The purpose of a wing is to allow the organism to fly.
When you use purpose exactly the same way.
Well, the purpose of amoeba, then you're asking what's the purpose of anything. So you're saying nothing has purpose.
Okay, so a wing allows a bird to fly. It's not necessarily the purpose of it.
No, but you have to understand, it took hundreds, probably of millions of years to go from where it started to develop to when it was functional.
Yeah, but when you're talking about...
Hold on, Trick, hold on.
Okay, all right.
Hold on. Go now, like, let's forget about millions of years. How about like 100, 200 years into this development? It's got this teeny little knob or something, whatever. And like, how could like that, take this progression? How could that not be explained by a plan that eventually that's going to turn out to be a wing?
So this
It can
is
be
kind
explained
of
by evolution.
yeah. So
It can be explained
evolution
by
says that
things
there's
replicate.
certain things
The
happen.
replicate is imperfect, and the environment shapes that replicate.
Right. So certain things happen, like you might have nubs in the back that may or may not be a benefit. If they're not a benefit, if they're a detriment, they tend to be weeded out. If they're not a detriment, they tend to stay around because they're not a detriment. But there might not be a survival aspect either. But then later on there might be something that grows that is a survival aspect, and that one will help propagate that even more. So you have like a flying squirrel, for example. A flying squirrel doesn't fly, but it glides. So you have these gliding features, which is an evolutionary advantage. And then the next step from that would be flying.
Chick, you're making my point. Basically, you're explaining that it's a survival mechanism that, like, it's either beneficial or detrimental to survival. Survival is a purpose.
No. It's beneficial, detrimental, or it's benign. So a lot of times you have these benign traits that just exist along, and then they may become beneficial later on, depending on the environment, or they may become detrimental because of the environment change, or they may just be benign. And the benign ones they tend not to disappear, if they're benign, unless some other trait causes extinction or something like that.
This is really interesting, guys. Because this whole idea of intention or purpose, like, I do think people use it in different senses. But I mean, I think things can happen all the time without there being anybody planning it. And so, like, my take on this is just that things would have evolved the way they did based on whether they helped survival and reproduction or not, regardless of whether there was intelligence or not to guide it, I think.
Right. That is the theory of evolution. That's basically what evolution says is there's nothing that needs to guide it. It's just a process, and it weeds out certain things and it keeps in certain things, basically. So it's a process of weeding out and keeping in, and then the keeping in, you have different things that evolve, usually a lot of times benign things that are just there for no reason whatsoever. And then sometimes those creatures go into a different environment, and that becomes an advantage for some reason because of the environment they're in. So take whales for an example. Whales evolved from land animals. You could see they have fingers in their fins, basically. Their fins are fingers, which is unlike fish, basically, because the creature, the land animal that went in, used its fingers, and the ones with the more webbed fingers were able to survive underwater more. Were able to go deeper underwater and get more fish. The ones that were able to hold their breath longer were able to get more fish. So so they survived, and they passed on their genes, and those things passed on their genes, and so on, and until eventually you have a whale, basically. So it's crazy, I know, but there's no intelligent process to it. It's just a matter of weeding out the other ones that didn't survive.
All right.
Okay,
let's
just changing the subject a little bit, and just going back to the three focusing questions. So the first one was, is there any evidence for life after death?
The first one was logic.
From my perspective, there's minimal, and most of it is anecdotal. You have stuff in our religious texts, whether it's the Buddhist reincarnation or life after death in Levantine type theologies. We have the odd claim that we have life after death from near-death experiences. So evidence against it, other than the second law of thermodynamics. So to maintain this consciousness, it's got to suck energy out from somewhere. So I would argue from a energy conservation point of view, there's absolutely no evidence of our consciousness sucking energy out of the environment. And the third point was, what would I do differently from a moral point of view, whether I believe. It's really tough for me because I never believed in life after death. I don't ever remember believing I'm going to live forever. But the whole concept from a, I hate to say it, moral point of view, and Trick really has a lot to answer for here, is so we have to live this. If we don't believe in life after death, we just live this life as we best can, and if there's no free will, there's only one way we're going to live it.
It seems to me that if there's no afterlife, and if we don't believe in afterlife, then this life becomes ultra important. Whereas it seems to me that back when I was religious, and this seems to be the case with many other people, that when things go wrong in this life, they're like, oh, well, I'll get it better in the afterlife, so they don't care as much in this life.
I've never heard a religious person say that.
I've heard that kind of thing.
It might be the other way. Some people might say, oh, this is the only life. It doesn't matter if I steal, rob, kill and all that stuff, because I'm not going to have to pay a price.
Yeah, it all depends on the psychology, and it depends on the afterlife situation. Like if someone believes the afterlife is going to be a terrible place, then that's not going to make them happy. If they believe that they're going to go to heaven and so far, or if they act good, then that could, make them want to act good. If they have these morals that were, brought about via a Bible or something, or some scripture or something, and they believe in that, and they believe that the afterlife depends on how they act according to that scripture, they're going to act according to that scripture. So it's all dependent on how, on the factors of what they believe in regards to the afterlife.
Right. So basically what you're saying is it's more like the other psychological factors and other beliefs that take a part in how they act, more so than whether they believe in an afterlife or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
So yeah, if there's an afterlife, you're going to behave differently, obviously. For me, I think it's important to do as much good as I can while I'm around, right? So because that's all I can do. All I can do is as much as I can do while I'm around, because I'm not going to be around any longer. If people die and then they just go to some afterlife anyway, there's nothing, there's not much that we can do. We could still prevent suffering and all that stuff here on Earth, but
yeah,
we don't have to worry about death as much, if people die, they don't really die. So
yeah.
It's like,
See, that's my point, Trick, because how I feel about this is that then I would just be anti-pain. Like I wouldn't be against killing somebody if I believe they don't actually die. Therefore, abortion and assisted suicide would no longer be something I'd be against if I did believe in an afterlife.
Chandler, whoa, slow down. I mean, like we have laws against killing ourselves and others, not just for the sake of the person, but the sake of the people left behind.
I have a counter argument for that, George. Listen to this.
Go ahead.
The counter argument for that is if those people are upset because somebody died, well, we just kill them so they can be reunited with their loved ones.
Fine. So you kill every sentient being on the planet. There you go.
Right. That's what it leads to.
That's another topic too, because I'm a pro assisted suicide. Like I think that should be legalized, not something illegal. That there's no reason why somebody that wants to leave existence shouldn't have the ability to do that.
Pro-choice, Trick. I don't think you're insisting everyone does suicide.
Yeah. Well, pro-choice is an abortion debate, but
yeah, no. If somebody's like miserable every day after day after day, they're 90 years old. God, put them out of their misery. I mean, if that's what they want.
Yeah, I think people should be able to have doctor-assisted suicide, basically. So if they really want to leave this world, they can. But that's a different topic, I guess.
Yeah, it's a different topic, and I'm not going to debate that topic. But I would just say that my feelings about those topics would be completely different if I believed in an afterlife, because the person doesn't actually die. Therefore, there's no need to justify killing them because they don't die.
All right, but I mean, you could use the same argument for like we have this one life. In other words, like within the scheme of 14 billion years that of our known universe, forget what came before after the Big Bang and all that stuff. Our life is like a sliver of insignificance. So it doesn't really matter whether any of us lives or dies.
Well, lives or dies, I guess, is one thing, but it does matter if we suffer, right?
Well, yeah, that's the only thing I think matters.
Because regardless of, I mean, it doesn't matter if we're a sliver of the entirety of existence or we're all that there is. I mean, we're the same either way. The grand scheme, everything external to us is irrelevant, basically. It makes no difference morally or ethically. It makes no difference if we're a sliver of the entirety of the universe or if we're all the universe.
All right, well, no, it does make it. For example, like these next 5 seconds, how important are they? Like 2, 3, 4, 5, they're gone already. So in other words, like, within the span of our lives, they're like nothing. So like, taking the big, because like, we can either see things subjectively within our brief span of time, like 80 years, whatever, or we see things realistically, objectively, as they are.
Well, let's put it this way. If you have like 80, let's say someone has 80 to 90 years of life, if they're tortured for 5 minutes in the worst torture possible, that's important, regardless of the other 89 point whatever years that they have. That's irrelevant to that 5 minutes of torture.
No, I agree with you completely. But the life is not relevant. In other words, especially like if you believe we have one life, right? And you believe you have to be alive to suffer, to experience pain, then it really doesn't matter whether you're alive or dead. Because like, if you get killed, you're not feeling any more pain anyhow.
Right. But your existence could help other creatures not suffer.
I'm not quite seeing the relevance here of assisted suicide to an afterlife. So are we arguing for or against? Like, I don't quite see the relevance.
We kind of went off a tangent here, I think. I don't think we're talking about suicide anymore.
I'm doing your job, Chandler. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I just think that what happens is that our hesitancy to kill somebody, at least in my case, is sort of tied to the finality of death. Whereas if there's an afterlife, then it all just becomes about whether somebody's suffering or not, and then life or death isn't an issue because death doesn't exist.
Right, and if you believe in an afterlife because of sin, that has religious connotations or anything to it, then it makes sense to kill somebody before they sin, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Like,
I mean, there's a lot of these weird consequences to all these weird beliefs about the afterlife, right? So, but people don't really tie those consequences in.
Right. and so, I mean, I find it interesting, though. I find it very fascinating because, yeah, like, depending on your belief system, particularly the nature of an afterlife. For example, the belief that, like you just mentioned, if you kill somebody before they sin, then they go to heaven, whereas if you let them live and then they sin, then they go to hell, then you want to kill everybody as quick as possible.
Right. My particular belief in an afterlife is that there is no hell, there's only heaven, because nobody has a free will. You know how amazingly unfair it would be for anyone to be cast off into eternal damnation for what isn't even their doing, their fault?
Absolutely.
Why is there suffering on the planet then?
Yep, that would be bullshit.
That's a good question, Trig, and that is the question. That is the question. In other words, like from my standpoint, at least as a theist, like, why would suffering develop?
Well, obviously the universe isn't fair. So if the universe isn't fair to begin with, then why would you think it would be fair in the afterlife if there was one?
Oh,
No,
that
a good point.
yeah,
That's
that
a good
brings up
point.
a whole nother topic. The idea of fairness in the afterlife is a central aspect of many people's religions, where they think that it's based on like they deserve something because they either acted or believed a certain way. But because none of us believe in free will and deserve, then the concept of suffering in an afterlife because you were bad or even being rewarded because you were good makes no sense. I would want, if there was an afterlife, of course I want everybody to be blissed out happy, obviously. I think we all would. But I don't see how that would happen. If it didn't happen
All right,
in
guys,
this life.
what is the evidence for tomorrow all probabilistic?
The evidence for what?
For tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
In other words, do we believe that tomorrow is going to come, or do we just hope it? Or do we plan for it? You know, because basically, like, in a certain sense, hard scientific evidence, there's no solid evidence that tomorrow is going to come, that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, the earth is going to be here, that anything's going to be here tomorrow. We just
I think that's induction, right? So all induction is it kind of projects onto the future a little bit. It makes predictions about the future. So the fact that the sun came up yesterday and the day before and for thousands of years or whatever, for as long as we've seen it, we make the prediction that it's likely to come up tomorrow.
Right, but you see my point? It's a probabilistic kind of expectation. It's not really based on any hard scientific evidence.
Well, science isn't based on absolutes. It's only based on, like I said, like it's only based on what we can falsify, induction, deduction, these type of things. It's not. There's no absolutes in science.
George, we have 14 billion tomorrows as evidence under our belt. We have afterlives under our belt as evidence.
But that's kind of like a probabilistic. It's not. I'm not sure you can call it scientific evidence, because just because, like, for example, just because something happened in the past scientifically, for example, an atom splits. Okay, we just saw it split. Now we can't really conclude that it's going to split again and again and again. I mean, like, we in science, like, we have these expectations that are just based on what do you call it?
It's on an induction. So if we strike matches, and they light, we understand that the composition of those matches and the friction of the cardboard box that you're striking on, we understand that is most likely going to lead to that match lighting. Now, there might be a rare case that the match is wet or something weird happens and it doesn't light, but there's a high probability. Yeah. So if you want to say it's probabilistic, sure, but we can denote a probability based on past induction of all the evidence that it's going to light when we strike the next match.
Yeah. And for me, the strongest inductive bit of evidence is that the second law of thermodynamics doesn't give an afterlife much of a hope. And essentially, if you want an afterlife, it's got to be fed with energy, and that energy is going to come from somewhere. And there's no evidence that energy is being fed. How is the law of
thermodynamics? Does entropy, prohibit, for example, energy?
There's a lot of misconception about entropy and sort of randomness. What it is, it's the second law of thermodynamics is more about the ability to do work. And if you have a consciousness, I presume you have an ability to do work. And to have an ability to do work, that consciousness needs to be getting high grade or a higher grade energy from somewhere.
Well, we have like 96% of the universe. I think with dark matter, dark energy now is under question, but like that we know is out there, we can't measure or interact with. So it can, clearly come from there.
I didn't
quite catch.
I think what Yuri's trying to get at is what energy it would be fueling us for an eternal afterlife of that sort of thing.
That's what I just Well, again, like, with the eternal, okay, it's like, law of conservation of mass energy, you can't create or destroy mass energy. So, like, that has an eternal
That's
nature.
the first law.
But in terms
Now
of
the second law.
right, you're saying, like, where is the energy going to come from? What I said before is that basically 96% of our universe, we kind of like guess it's out there, but we can't interact with it. So like,
there's a lot of energy in our universe. So I don't see that as really the strongest argument. I think the configuration is the argument. Where's the configuration going to come from that the energy powers to have a consciousness, if not for a brain configuration? So
that's like asking. Go ahead.
But I mean, if you ask the question eternally, can an internal consciousness exist? Then you're right. Like that, eventually, all the energy in the universe is going to disperse, basically, and you're not going to be able to have anything running at all.
All right, you guys got to realize we're talking about the observable universe that, to our understanding, started 14 billion years ago. In other words, like, when we're looking for a mechanism for how that happened, we have no idea. It goes completely beyond science.
So, and the other question is like, so for me, the universe has been in action for 14 billion years. As far as we can sort of tell, it's going to go on for hundreds of billions of years. Do you really want that as the universe winds down? Tell me, do you really want that?
Want what?
To exist for that long.
If it's
so afterlife of watching the universe wind down.
Well, I mean, the universe winds down, but again, we're talking the observable universe, from the Big Bang. But like, who knows if there could have been an infinite number of big bangs, big crunches. It could be cyclical. Just because our known universe stops or just whatever doesn't mean that time and reality stops.
Yeah, but George, do you want this?
Well, again, I would want it only under the condition.
No, I'm asking my first question is, do you want it? This afterlife that goes on seemingly interminably.
Yes, if it's blissful, absolutely. Why wouldn't I?
Okay.
What would be the point?
What's the point of anything?
Right. So what's the point?
We are hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So I'm just like expressing that to the nth degree.
I see.
Yeah, George just wants to be happy forever.
You've answered it.
Okay, but the other question is, should you believe in it if there's no evidence for it?
If there's no harm for it, because you have to understand, we're not here to get things right. We're here to be as happy as possible. It just so happens that for a lot of us, getting things right makes us happy.
But don't you care about having true beliefs?
Well, sure. And in other words, like this belief is, I believe in my whole, philosophical realm of understanding. It's singular. This, I think it's probably the only belief I have. But it makes sense because it makes me feel good. And it doesn't seem to do any harm.
Oh, yeah, but is make me feel good a reason to believe? Like, don't you think that there's better methods than because it makes me feel good that are more consistent and reliable?
Well,
I mean, do you think that's everybody has beliefs that because it makes them feel good, but there's so many beliefs out there that are just fictions, basically, just because it makes people feel good, though.
I would love to believe that the universe, because again, I'm a theist, that the universe, God was all good. I can't begin to believe that because I don't believe in free will. So no, it's not like I'm, discounting or ignoring truth and evidence, but in this particular question, given the extraordinary, amazing quality of the the universe, that again, like we were saying before, some of it transcends logic, given that like that this world is so amazing. Yeah, it's not beyond consideration that we exist eternally.
It's not beyond consideration. Yeah, we could consider it, but then we have to look at the evidence to consider it, right?
Right. Like, I find this conversation interesting because it goes back to the happiness versus truth, which is more important.
Right, and generally, I think truth is in service of happiness. Generally, I think it's like, it's a great tool for happiness, but in terms of how we're designed, we're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Yeah, but I think like if we to spread critical thinking around I think it would make a better world. And I think when we say that it's okay to believe in things that aren't critically thought about, that just make us happy because and that's the only reason we give, then that's kind of problematic because it kind of spreads this idea that people should believe like that when I think it could cause other problems in the world.
Okay, well, you have a very good point. So, like, anytime I would present this point, it would be like the caveat that this is the only belief I have that I'm aware of, and I don't ordinarily promote a belief that goes against the preponderance of evidence.
Okay, I guess I can't. I don't know. It's hard to say because how influential is that caveat? Do you think people would say, oh, well, I can have a caveat. I believe and then believe something that's a little more harmful, which they might not realize it's more harmful, but believe something that's more harmful, even though it just makes them happy. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, I mean,
it just seems dangerous to have a caveat of going against, especially when it comes to beliefs. So, like, beliefs, I think are something that you really want to have strong evidence for, or at least logical consistency with.
See, what I think is I feel like this is like the real debate, because we started out talking about an afterlife, but what I think is going on is we have a basic difference between some people who just want to believe in an afterlife because it makes them feel better, whereas other people require things to be based in truth because truth is important to them. And so we've kind of stumbled on an even bigger question, perhaps. Like, does truth matter, or should we just all believe what makes us happier?
Let's say you lived in a world where, like, you got everything right. You knew everything exactly the way it is, right? But you were miserable. Okay, I mean, miserable every moment of every day. Or you had the possibility of like getting completely everything wrong. You don't understand a goddamn thing, but you're blissed out. Which would you prefer?
Well,
I can tell you
what's worse for the consequences of everybody else that you exist with is the question.
Well, that's a different question. What
he said.
Right.
As a consequentialist, I'm not just concerned about myself. I'm concerned about the entirety of the planet. What direction I want to see the planet causally lead to, basically. This is the ethics that I'm talking about, Yuri. But go ahead.
Right. Basically, yeah, you're saying I believe. We agree that the truth is a better tool than groundless belief for creating a better world. Absolutely. But in this particular case of the belief in the afterlife, I can't see the harm in it, and I can see a lot of good coming from people. Like, for example, people are like, they get older and stuff, and for some people think about it. For some people, the idea of just not having a free will is really, really unpleasant. So like add to that the idea of just ceasing to exist. If you're talking about a lot of people, half of which here in the United States believe in Adam and Eve rather than evolution, creation is evolution. I mean, I think we're doing them their service. We make them happier to allow them to have that belief.
Well, let me give you this, because I kind of see what you're saying to a degree. Like, I think that if if there was this scenario where we exist in a bubble, for example, and we can be blissed out happy without having, with having false beliefs. For example, let's say we're all imported into some virtual reality system where we're safeguarded against harming other people. Then we can have whatever fake virtual reality we want, and even pretend it's real if we want. And that's not going to harm another creature, and it'll make us feel good. So that's perfectly fine, right? There's no ethical problem to that. So I kind of understand what you're saying there, but at the same time, we don't exist in a bubble. We exist interconnected with all these other people, and if we want, I think if we want the world to causally go better, basically, then we want to enforce this idea that having false beliefs is problematic, at least for a large part of the world.
There's a nice quote by George Bernard Shaw. The fact that a believer is happier than a skeptic is no more to the point than the fact that a drunken man is happier than. And if I want to be happy, I can always have a drink. Yeah, I don't find it a good argument, George. I have to admit.
Well, the argument is that it's based on how we're programmed. We're hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. In other words, if a belief is going to make a person happier than the truth, all things being the same, the belief is more desirable.
Yeah, well, I agree with what Trick was saying, that if we existed in a bubble and it was only our happiness and no one else was affected, then I would be in complete agreement with George that we should just all believe whatever crazy thing we want to make ourselves happy if we were in that situation. But because we're not, I'm a little bit more hesitant about letting people believe false things because of the harm that results from it.
We promote free will as an illusion because I think, very clearly understand the harm the belief causes. I mean, in so many ways, our relation to other people, our relation to ourselves, the belief just causes so much harm. But then take the belief in Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden versus evolution, okay? I don't think I would, spend a lot of energy, a lot of time trying to get people to believe in evolution, because their belief that they are created from God, that they're special and all that stuff, makes them really happy. To the extent that you disavow them of that belief and they become much less happy, what good have you done?
So evolutionary theory has progressed us ages in medical science and a ton of sciences that have been beneficial to humanity. But if everybody said, "Oh, there's no such thing as evolution," then that progression wouldn't exist.
No, Trey, I'm saying that right now in the United States, half of Americans believe in creationism, okay? I mean, if you're saying you care about people.
And they want to teach creationism in science classroom instead of, or as an alternative to evolutionary theory, which is problematic for scientists today who want the actual facts about science to progress.
I agree with you. But let's say we can prevent them from doing that. But to the extent that we disavow them of that belief, they become miserable. I mean, what good have we done?
I don't think they would become miserable. I think it would actually break away a lot of their chains that are causing a lot of their misery. Actually,
George, can I say something? There are times when evolution and just a godless universe doesn't bring me much comfort because I've known people who died. I've had a pet that died as well. I told you about that. But just because it might be depressing sometimes, it doesn't mean it's not true. You know what I mean?
Right, and you just reminded me, even the belief in God. The belief in God, I think, you can have a rational argument for God. We've had this debate before, God being synonymous with the universe. But aside from that, the belief in God, that the universe is not this cold, heartless thing, but that it's a conscious being that cares for us, brings a lot of people a lot of joy. And again, go back several hundred years, go back a few thousand years, life was really hard. I mean, anything they could grab onto, like to feel better, was very valuable to them.
Yeah, but you're not looking at all the horrors that religion has caused. And religion is based on these ideas about gods and things like that.
Yeah, but no, I'm talking about the belief in God. It's like, you're right. I mean, how religion developed is very problematic, but that's different from the simple.
It's more than that, George. The belief. If people can believe in God, for example, then it shows that they're not able to critically think. And if they're not able to, and I'm not talking about the pantheist God. I'm talking about some deity that exists that watches over us.
And another thing I'd like to add is that the belief in a God is not actually comforting if you understand that it implies that God intelligently designed the suffering and the diseases and programmed people to be so cruel to the animals and all that. So the belief in God actually makes people unhappy.
All right, Trick, you introduced, you made a statement, an assertion. You said like believing in the God of the Bible, demonstrates a lack of intelligence. Who's typing?
No. I'm just saying, like, believing in anything. It doesn't even have to be a God. Believing in anything without evidence, it makes it so you're able to tie that into pretty much anything. It creates a standard of thinking that's problematic. And then it causes these other problems that are like the root problems of religion and things like that cause all these harms in the world. If people are able to critically think about these things, then you don't have I would say you wouldn't have as many problems like that.
Well, I mean, critical thinking would tell you that, life essentially really doesn't have any meaning, because like to have meaning, you'd have to ascribe it, to some kind of like being that created us and stuff. So it doesn't matter whether we live or die. Life becomes completely meaningless.
Well, when you say meaning, you mean individual meaning, or do you mean some ultimate meaning? Because you're right, there's no ultimate meaning.
Both.
That's not true. Individual meaning exists. Like you can have personal meaning without belief in any afterlife or God or anything.
But the most objective perspective on that would say, well, no, that's the subjective. They just believe they have meaning, but if the universe or reality doesn't have meaning, how are they going to have meaning?
What would give them meaning if the universe has meaning? Why does that make it any different?
Well, it's kind of like, for example, if something exists, in reality, then we can say it exists in our subjective experience. But if we're asserting,
I'm saying what could have meaning above us, I guess, that would give us meaning. Let's say God exists. Let's say God exists.
That's a good question.
Then the meaning is just his subjective opinion. So it's the same. It's no different.
No. If you're invoking God, you have to see God as everything. God is objective. God is the only objectivity.
But I don't understand that at all.
I don't need to believe in God to, have a sense of purpose or a sense of morality. I just don't see the connection, because God's not proven, is it? You know what I mean? So.
I think, I think we talked about this before, if we define God as everything, and that's one of the standard definitions, well, the universe is everything. If we define God as all powerful, well, the laws of nature are all powerful. So I think,
but if you're just defining God as everything, then you can just say, then without even using the word God, you can just say everything exists, therefore purpose and meaning exists.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, you're right.
Where are you invoking the purpose and the meaning from, I guess?
No, that's a good question. When you asked, how we can ascertain that objectively there's meaning, I don't know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So critical thinking, I mean, it's the same either way. Though we only have personal meaning, basically. We can understand that suffering exists. We can understand and empathize with other people's suffering and stuff like that, or their happiness. We can understand these things, and those exist. We can understand that they're out there in the universe. So that's the only purpose and meaning we can objectively have.
All right, but
Either way.
so like I mean like if we were to if everyone were like Chandler, if Chandler got hold of a button, right, and every sentient being ceased to exist, then would that be no better or worse than we have it now?
It might be better because you cut away all the suffering in the world.
All right, so okay, that makes sense.
It's the red button analogy.
But you cut away all the pleasure too, though. I mean,
Right, but if you don't exist to know that you're not experiencing pleasure, then it's not a problem.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
Anyway, we're off topic again, I think, but yeah, because I'm an anti-natalist, so I don't think people should be bringing other lives into existence. For example, I think it's problematic.
Is that? But like, is there evidence for that, or is that more of a belief?
No. I think it's based on the cost-benefit analysis. Basically, suffering reduction.
Trick. But
wait a minute, you're also reducing pleasure.
Yeah, but it's pleasure that no one ever wanted or needed to begin with.
So your belief is like to experience is better than to not experience.
Only once you're already in existence. Once you're in existence already, then there's something that desires or wants pleasure. But prior to that, there isn't. So
is that a belief?
No, that's a fact.
All right, but wait a minute. I'm trying to. Could that be a belief without evidence? In other words, like basically, you're kind of like having. What is that? Who is doing that? What is that stuff?
yeah, what is that awful sound? Where's that coming from?
So my question is like, are we establishing the premise?
No, it's not me that time.
All right, as a fact that non-existence, you know, is what is more desirable because I don't
more
get it.
Desirable. So antinatalism is not bringing new lives in that can't consent to being brought into existence. So we know that there's this asymmetry between harms and pleasure when it comes to non-existence, because there's nothing that wants. We don't lament the lack of life on Mars. Like there's no need to be ethically concerned that there's not enough life on Mars. But there is a reason to be ethically concerned about suffering of existing life.
Right. Okay. But like, for example, like my main field is happiness. And I know like the average person throughout the world is about 65% happy. In a lot of the world is about 70% happy. So, you know, from that analysis, it would seem there's more pleasure than pain in the world.
Yeah. Well, and once you're in existence, obtaining more pleasure than pain is of key importance. But prior to that, there's no need to bring anything else into existence that never desires existence to begin with. There's nothing that wants, needs, or desires existence prior to existence.
Yeah,
So this gets back into the whole, I guess, meaning thing that you're talking about. This higher, there's no lower level meaning and there's no higher level meaning. There's only the meaning in between, which is when we're already in existence. That's the only time this meaning.
Oh no, we got Sonic the Hedgehog coming on.
Oh, right.
Where's that coming from?
Turn it down to be steaming.
This is terrible. The interruptions that happen here.
I do think you'll hear that because it is long, real long.
So, all right, but
You come from out for some reason.
It seems you're you know and I kind of get it in a way. I mean, like, I'm not sure I agree with whatever, but like that non-existence is more beneficial than existence because it doesn't have any pain associated with it. Now, naturally, it doesn't have any pleasure either.
Well, let's look at the state of the world as it is right now. If we look in the wild, there's so much suffering that's going on. There's animals being eaten alive. It's just basically a horror story. So the pleasure doesn't really override the horror story that's happening in the wild right now. So
Trick, you've said that before. I don't see that. Because my understanding is, like, for example, like, a lion attacks a gazelle. It's over, like, in a few minutes. It's rare that it lasts, beyond,
I disagree,
like,
and I don't know if you've ever seen videos of lion attacking gazelles, but usually the gazelle's on the ground and you see its heart going boom, 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 boom while it's being eaten alive for.
I know, but a lot of times, but
a long time afterwards.
I know, but don't animals go into shock and stuff? I mean, like, they just, like, they lose the ability, because we go into shock.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been in extreme pain, but I have, and I did not go into shock in a way that prevented that pain. So I don't know.
Yeah, see, I mean, I'm slightly in agreement with Trick here, because, for example, the way I look at it is that even if all humans were completely blissed out, every single one of them experienced all pleasure and no pain, the fact that humans, for example, are causing tons of suffering to other animals when they kill them for food or sport, and not even accounting, the wild animals killing each other, but just what humans do to other animals means that no amount of pleasure that those humans derive from their life is worth the pain that they cause to others, if that makes sense.
Right, but once we're in existence, it's important that we increase the pleasure and reduce the pain for people in existence. But once you die, you lose all the ability to suffer. So that's not a negative. But yeah, you lose the ability to have that pleasure as well. So it's.
Yeah. Again, this has to be, like, considering what we know of our world, the chemistry, the physics, the quantum mechanics and stuff. There are so many things that are counterintuitive that we would think, like, how can this be? But it is. And we can, like, probably, there are probably dozens of examples that are just, like, beyond, any kind of, like, commonsensical expectation.
Yeah, but George, have you ever gone?
Hold on, let me finish the thought.
Okay.
Let me finish the thought. So, like, basically, just as, like, we use kind of, like, probabilities and inductive reasoning to expect that, or hope and expect that tomorrow is going to come. I think in a good sense. Jamie, cut that out.
It's not
Mute
me.
yourself.
I think it's W.
WSD. Mute yourself. Thank you. So, all right. Again, we use the example of, like, using.
That was not me.
All right, whatever it is, somebody's like. So we use that same rationale, that same principle of inductive reasoning, that, like, to expect that we're going to be here tomorrow because we've been here, like, for countless whatever. So, like, if there's so much phenomena in our scientific knowledge of our reality that basically transcends or just is beyond our commonsensical understanding, then wouldn't that give at least a scientific, a lot of science is based on inspiration. It's based on, like, hunches and whatever. Wouldn't that open the opportunity, the door to saying, like, conservatively, that, well, we don't know what happened before we were born and after we die and all that stuff and all that, and that it's conceivable,
George,
considering that the amazing. Now, I'm trying to talk, but somebody's, who's typing?
I don't know.
Like, yeah, cut it out. Mute yourself.
Ain't me. I have my mic muted.
Who's playing Sonic the Hedgehog?
Somebody doesn't like what I'm saying, whatever. So, like, all right, who's doing that?
Stop doing it. W. Steve, mic comes through too loud, man.
Who is it?
His mic comes through too loud. It distorts, man. That's how loud it is.
All right. Let me just finish up what I'm trying to say. again, within science, within our standard science. All right, come on. Who's the fucking come on? Somebody's doing this purposely. This is bullshit.
Oh man, yeah, I know. I don't understand this. I mean, is it because I think
Dude, I'm telling you, no, it ain't me. I'm telling you. Every time I talk, I unmute my mic. Every time I let y'all talk, I mute my mic.
So
It's
Jamie,
not me.
somebody's typing.
It is
Jamie,
not me doing it.
You. All right, Jamie, you're usually the one who's typing. Have you been typing?
Yeah, I've been typing, but he's the one who's got the loud microphone.
Mute your mic. Mute your mic.
Yeah, but listen.
Mute your mic, Jamie, because we hear you.
Listen, when he wipes his microphone, you can hear it. That's how fucking loud it is.
But it's typing that I'm hearing. It's not him muting his like moving his mic.
Yeah, I know, but I have to type to tell him what's going on.
Jamie, just mute your mic, all right? All right, so like, let me just try to say this without, all right, basically, there are so many amazing things in our universe, okay? I mean, that are standard science, that nobody, like quantum entanglement. Cut it out, Jamie, what the fuck?
Anyway, George, so have you ever gone under surgery?
Yes, I have.
Do you remember any of that time while you were under that surgery?
Some of it.
See, for me, I went under surgery. They knocked me out. I woke up and lost all time. There was no time between the point of anesthesia and waking up that I remembered, because it wasn't there. It didn't exist. It seemed like it was.
When I go to sleep. That happens as we sleep.
Well, we dream when we sleep. Like, this seemed like it was an instant. Like, they turned off your consciousness. So, and it has to do with manipulating brain states to do that. So if they could do that just by manipulating your brain state, what makes you think that your consciousness will continue on when your brain is no longer there? I mean,
that's exactly what I said. In other words, what makes me think that one particle at one end of the universe can communicate instantaneously, much faster than the speed of light, with another particle at the other end of the universe? So there's aspects of this universe that are so far beyond our ability to understand.
Well, no, I mean, we do understand, and that's why
George,
we have them.
George, just because it's beyond our ability to understand, it doesn't mean there is some universal intelligence or whatever that you're arguing for.
Well, no,
just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's there.
No, my argument for universal intelligence has to do with, like, if we don't have a free will and we're doing something that we label as intelligence,
whether it's life after death, or the argument that because we don't understand doesn't mean something else exists.
No. My point is, like, and Trick, again, like with entanglement, we have no idea how it happens.
Yeah, we got no idea, and that's where the sentence stops.
Right, yeah. But and that's what I'm saying. Like, we have no idea of certain phenomenon that are happening according to our understanding of science.
Yeah, but
exactly.
we do study consciousness. Like we have neuroscience and we have consciousness studies, which basically they make the correlations between our conscious feelings and thoughts and all these things and the chemical processes that are going on in your brain. They make the connections. They can take MRI scans and determine what they can almost, they have a process now that almost recreates what you're seeing now on a monitor screen without looking at what you're seeing on the monitor screen, just by looking at the brain scan alone. So
I recognize that.
It all has to do with the brain. So as soon as that brain is gone, we don't have consciousness anymore, as far as we know scientifically.
And Trick, that particular example you're citing is an amazing science, because they're not actually looking at the brain. They're actually looking at the degree of oxygenation of the blood in the brain. It's got, and actually, in some ways, it's not the brain. And they can determine...
they're just mapping certain areas of the brain that light up, basically.
In our existence.
Right. So they map certain areas of the brain that light up when we see something, and they're recreating that on a monitor screen without knowing what you're looking at, and then they compare the two afterward, and they're fairly close to each other.
All right, I realize
they're not very close, but they're amazing all the same.
They're
considering
pretty close,
you're looking at the blood effectively. You're not even looking at the brain. That's what
I understand. We know a lot.
fMRI looks at.
I understand we know a lot.
Blood chemistry.
Okay. I understand we know a lot, but let me ask you a question. Compared to how much there is to know, guess the fraction of what we know. What is it? Is it 1/1,000,000th of 1% of what there is to know that we know?
It doesn't matter what we know.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
What fraction it is. We have to make decisions on what we think we know. So basically, it's not as though not what we want or what we think might be. We make a decision on what evidence that we can reasonably consider.
Our greatest advancements in science.
Now, the second law of thermodynamics alone
have been constrained by scientists who say, well, this is the way things should be, so this is what we're going to do. The greatest advances in science have been made by scientists who, from inspiration, like electricity, things like this, they just take a leap. It's a leap of imagination, as Einstein would call it.
But the second thermodynamic law of dynamics alone should be enough. Sorry, George. The second thermodynamic law of thermodynamics alone should be enough for us to sort of have a really large degree of skepticism for life after death.
You guys there? Oh.
No. How do I mean? What's your evidence for that?
What's the evidence? We talk about quantum phenomena and stuff like that. All of that is a contradiction to the second law of thermodynamics. So, so basically, things wind down. There's no two ways about it. The energy sort of our consciousness, should we even think about it in those terms? So it's going to wind down. So
wind down.
From my point of view, let's get over it with it, and so it's an unnecessary belief.
Jury, I think you're misinterpreting the meaning of wind down. In other words, the law of conservation of mass energy means that mass energy continuously exists.
I'm a scientist by trade. I'm a chemist. I know the thermodynamics reasonably well. So you're referring to the first law of thermodynamics. I'm referring to the second.
So state it in terms of like the what it does to the related to conservation of mass energy.
Yeah, that's the first law of thermodynamics.
Right. So like the first law is not exempted by the second law. The first law remains.
Sorry, I missed that.
The first law of the conservation of mass energy is not is not nullified.
We don't lose mass or energy. I get it. They're interconvertible.
That's what I'm saying. Right. So that's evidence for an afterlife that would be.
But what happens is that mass and energy gets effectively in sort of common terms diluted, and the ability to do stuff, to be conscious or to do work, goes away. So unless you're feeding your consciousness with something, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Well, first you're talking about the 14 billion year observable universe, and then you're discounting the fact that conservation of mass energy says no, that mass energy is infinite, eternal.
No. He's not saying that the energy goes away. It gets distributed. The second law is basically entropy. It
evaporates.
Well, it doesn't evaporate. The energy is always existing, but it's distributed. So it's disorder is what it's called. So it's going from order to disorder.
You can't do useful work with it anymore.
Right, but what happens if there's a big crunch?
Then if there's a big crunch, then you're going to lose your consciousness during the big crunch.
No. If there's a big crunch, then this dissipated energy comes back together.
Yeah, but the Big Crunch means it would go back to basically a singularity where everything's
the
inside.
evidence is against the Big Crunch at the moment, but
Right.
it doesn't matter. So essentially, your consciousness has to be fueled all the time. And I'm asking you, what's doing the fueling after you're dead?
Well, that's just like asking, how did the Big Bang come into being? Because we have no idea, but we know it must have.
Lawrence Krauss and company might disagree with you, and Hawking might disagree with you, but I'm not going to argue on their behalf because it's outside my field of experience.
If you read Krauss's book, his like something from nothing, he's just playing word games with that. He doesn't mean nothing like in the conventional meaning.
Well, this way, Krauss isn't here to defend himself, but then again,
no, I've heard him say that.
Is Hawking playing word games too?
What is Hawking? I haven't heard Hawking's statement on that.
Okay, so The Grand Design is a great book, worth reading.
No, I just haven't heard him say that there was such a thing as nothing, and that to me, nothing is not a scientific term.
No, but Krauss, in his words, is talking about the real nothing, not some imaginary nothing.
I mean, look, you can apply nothing to what happened, what was before the Big Bang that we know nothing about. But I think like logically, again, how could like something spring from nothing? It just like, logic is the foundation of something.
But this is irrelevant anyway. I mean, regardless of if it sprang from nothing or sprang from something, and it could be a multiverse as far as we know, and each universe springs another universe and so on. You could have an infinite regress all the way back if you want of that. It's all irrelevant. The point is, just because we don't know that doesn't mean, I mean, we're not making assertions over it either. Likewise, to make the assertion that, life after death exists would be just as incorrect as making an assertion about, a very specific thing that happened prior to the Big Bang, which we don't have any evidence for.
Well, I agree with that.
Basically, go on the evidence we have at the moment.
Right. And the evidence that we have at the moment shows that consciousness is tied to brain states. I mean, that's where all of our evidence is pointed to. So you're kind of rejecting that when you say that absent the brain, the consciousness will still exist.
Well, I'm rejecting it from the standpoint of intelligence. In other words, like, you have to have consciousness to have intelligence, and if we do things that are intelligent and we don't have a free will, we can't ascribe that intelligence to ourselves.
Well, then you're going against evolutionary theory, which doesn't need intelligence to produce brains which have intelligence.
I don't believe I'm going against evolutionary theory. But if Darwin said that things just happen, for example, that a cell divides without there being an intention for the cell to divide, then yeah, he would have been wrong.
Oh, well, there's no need for an intention. Just like there's no need for an intention for any other chemical process that happens. When you mix two chemicals together and they explode, there's no need for an intention for those two chemicals to explode when they mix.
The need for it is, why it's like causality. Things don't happen without a reason, without a cause. In other words, like
a cause isn't teleological. It's not. There's no intention needed for a cause. A rock falling off a mountain, rolling down a hill because of gravity, doesn't require an intention. It just requires physics. So same thing with the chemical process or the evolutionary process as well.
Well, I don't believe that. If you have a cell that's dividing, the first cell that ever divided, that there was an intention to that.
Why? Why do you say that?
How else do you explain it? Why? Why
would it want to divide? It's a chemical process. It's a chemical process of complex molecules doing a process. That's all it is. It's just a chemical process. When you have
chemicals, chemicals are governed by chemical laws, right? And these laws, so then you could simply say that the laws are governing, causing are the reason why chemicals act the way they do.
There's no
So you
intention
have-
for the laws either. You don't need an intention for the laws of physics.
if something happens, again, like that's, if something happens, an intention is a more logical reason than it just happened. It just happened is not scientific. It's not logical.
It causally happened, not
It's
intention.
still there. It's causal. There's causality pervades everything. So like, whether it intentionally causally happened or not, intentionality seems more logical than it just happened.
What causes the intention?
A prior intention.
What causes that intention?
There we get back to the infinite regress. Fine.
Infinite regress.
Infinite regress of intentions?
Well, fine. Yeah, I recognize that trick you're talking about, the very nature of reality. The expansion outward.
Your explanation isn't required. You don't need intention. All you need is causality. You don't need. There's nothing that needs intention to get the ball rolling of causality. You can have an infinite regress of just causality. You don't need intention anywhere.
Well, again, like from our experience, things happen because they're intended to happen. In other words, like with evolution, cell division, all that stuff. It makes more sense to say something was intended than to say it just happened.
The only thing we know has intention are conscious creatures that intend things. This is scientifically we don't apply intention anywhere else, but creatures that have intention. That's
why, again, like to the extent with evolution, like that a human brain evolved without intention for it, and we can even get back to the wing example. All right, like the wing, takes 400 million years to develop to functioning. In 300,000 years, you have changes, and you can't tell me that those are just like without intention, and without intention every year after year after year after million years. All of a sudden going to turn into this wing. I'm sorry.
No. You're misunderstanding the whole conception here, because it's not. It just turns into a wing. It goes through a process, and some of those are benign processes that don't do anything beneficial, but they don't harm the creature either.
But it never turns into a computer, okay? It turns into a wing, and this is not just with one species, with a lot of species. It doesn't turn into a galaxy. It doesn't turn into a sun. It doesn't turn into a grain of sand.
Yeah, but it starts out with gliders, for example. It starts out with being able to glide from tree to tree.
No, but way before that, it has absolutely no use.
A lot of times it doesn't. We have a lot of things that are attached to us that have absolutely no use. I mean,
but that's what I'm saying. But when it does eventually turn out to something useful like a wing, you have to induct. You have to like basically logically.
It does, so, for example, when something is able to glide because of some webbed attachment it has, then it's helpful. It's beneficial for its survival, which allows it to procreate. And
the trick we're going before that.
And the ones that have the more webbing, for example, are able to procreate more because they're able to catch more insects.
Trick, we're exploring what happened before that, before any functional use of these stages that have eventually led even to the webbing.
Before that, you have these creatures that are dying out because they have these attachments that are either inhibiting.
They're not dying out because they're the creatures that survived to actually then evolve into the wings. They're the ones who exist.
Only the ones that have the ones that are an advantage or the benign evolved.
That's what I'm saying. But in order to get a wing, you have to have the ones that had those tiny little knobs that had no function to begin with.
You could, but there's probably tons of those animals that had those tiny little knobs that died out as well.
But that doesn't negate my point.
That's survival of the fittest. So if you have a tiny little knob that has that because of a mutation has a webbing on it, and that webbing allows some feature of survival over the one that doesn't have the little webbing, for example, a glide or able to jump higher, because they can spread their little webbing and they can jump a little higher and escape an animal quicker, a predator, then that's going to survive and pass on that gene for that webbing. And the ones that tend to have the bigger webbings, that those are ones that are going to survive even more. And
you keep progressing to functionality. You keep progressing to functionality. We're exploring this before there's any functionality in it, and it probably took hundreds of thousands of years to develop
functionality. It's all about functionality. You have things that have parts that are either functional, non-functional, or a detriment. That's it. And when they're functional, because they've gone into a climate, like if sometimes things evolve something that's not functional in the environment that they're in, but all of a sudden they migrate to a different environment, and that thing becomes functional because of the environment they're in.
Trick, what we're talking about is like the very first stages of this evolution to a wing, before any functionality in that apparatus at all.
Yes, that has to do with random mutation.
George, do you think there was any intention to evolve into a wing?
There had to have been. Because why didn't it evolve into a grain of sand?
In that case, you're not talking about evolution. You're talking about something else. I don't know what, but you're not talking about evolution.
I'm talking about evolution just in the same way as the people who developed the Big Bang were talking about the Big Bang when everybody believed in the steady state.
So basically what happened there was a whole bunch of evidence one way or the other, and so the steady state fell into disfavor. It may come back, or it may come back in a different form.
All right, so how did wings evolve? Wings evolved from arms used to capture small prey. They seemed rational.
Before that.
Wings evolved because bipedal animals were leaping into the air. Large wings assisted leaping.
Before that.
Before what?
Before
so now you're talking about the evolution of arms.
No, I'm talking about. We can do anything. An arm begins to look like a wing. Okay, it begins to like develop the structure of a wing. Okay, but it has absolutely no function as a wing. It has no function at all.
Right, but when you have animals that are leaping into the air to catch prey, right? So you have animals leaping into the air to catch prey. Then if you have some mutation that allows it to leap farther or leap higher, such as a webbing or something on its arm, just a little bit, it just needs a little bit, it's going to have an evolutionary advantage over the ones that don't have that. And it's going to pass that gene down.
Trick, we're talking about the time before that happened, before it had any functionality at all.
So before it had
arms. George, that's not true.
You're not talking about wings anymore. You're talking about arms.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about like...
Actually, they started gliding before they started flying, but yeah.
Wings evolved from arms, according to this. So it's not separate. Like when you have a bird, there's a reason why birds only have two legs, because the other two evolved from arms, right?
All right, Trick, imagine an arm beginning to evolve into a wing, okay? Imagine the first day it does that. The first day it does that.
George,
it may George, just, hold on, Juris. It may just involve a few cells. It may actually, that's the extent of the change.
It could be a random mutation.
Yeah, but that could have took millions of years, though.
Yeah, George, I have toes. I have toes that have a little webbing on them. So I have a web toe, is what's called. Okay. Now, if I needed that to catch fish, for example, then I might have an evolutionary advantage and pass on that gene of web toes to the next generation, and then that would increase the one that has the most web toes will pass on those genes, and the other ones will die out.
Trick, you're missing my point.
Proof of the Great Flood.
You're missing my point, Trick. Again, go back to an arm is going to evolve into a wing.
Hold on. I waited for you, George. Now you can wait for me.
Go ahead.
So our best understanding of how wings evolved at the moment, it may be wrong, is that it allowed ancient dinosaurs to run better. It gave them a better balance. So before they could fly, those wings gave them functionality.
Kind of like what the ostrich does now.
That's what we're addressing. So now my question is like, there was a time when that evolution from the leg to the wing began. And let's talk about the first hour. Forget about the first day, the first 1,000 years. The first hour.
It's chaotic.
That could have been
George.
chromosomal, genetic, absolutely no functionality.
It's usually from a random mutation.
But then it's got nothing to do with functionality. We just use words like that to try and express where we are. But what it is basically it's a chaotic function of the chemistry that's occurring within our genome or DNA. I'm not an expert on it, but what happens is there are variations. There's imperfect replication, and during that imperfect replication, some species fare better than others.
Right.
There's no intentionality.
What evidence is there for that? What evidence is there that it's like just accidental and there isn't any? For example, a scientist might conduct 100 experiments and on one of them succeed. Now, are you going to say that was like just all purposeless? This is the same thing that applies to this evolution. No, fine. There's a lot of mistakes, but there is a purpose to that experimentation.
Yeah, but then again, we're getting hung up on the semantics here. So we're using human semantics and thinking that they have some meaning in chemistry. So sometimes I just describe chemistry with a purpose, but chemistry itself has no purpose. And I'm talking about basically putting on this linguistic or semantic.
No, you're making the claim that you're making the claim
really
that a process. No, you're making a claim that a process that has so many mistakes, is not guided by any purpose. And I'm saying, like,
There's
in
no
science,
mistakes, George. Again, evolution has no mistakes. There's stuff that replicates and there's stuff that doesn't.
You guys were the ones who brought up like the failure to replicate, the mutations, the things that didn't work out.
I've been very quiet.
So certain things have survival benefit or they don't. He's right. Yuri is right. It's not really technically called a mistake. It's either whether it has a survival benefit or not. So some random mutation could not be a survival benefit. Matter of fact, it could be a big red blotch that makes you stand out for predators. And those will be wiped out by the predators and won't pass on their genes to the next generation. Whereas the one that happens to have the blotches that blend in with the bark that in their current environment will be camouflaged and able to pass on their genes to the next generation. And that's why...
I'm not arguing that, Trick. I'm arguing the beginning of that. And again, let's get back to the leg evolving into the wing. The first hour, there's absolutely no functionality to it. But but this process is going on. The first hour, first day, first week, first year, without any functionality at all, with the intention, with the purpose that eventually in 500 years.
There's no intention. It could be totally benign. It could be something can go through its entire life with a benign thing on its forehead that wasn't a survival benefit and it wasn't a detriment to its survival, and it could still survive because it has other things that are a survival benefit, and it just happens to has this big thing on its forehead because that's just the benign trait that randomly mutated. And now
we could say could be benign, but that's like when we don't know what's going to happen. But if we know that it ultimately evolved into the wing, we can't say that it's just benign anymore. We have to say
certain features evolve into certain other things that are a survival benefit, like wings, and certain things don't.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The ones that do have to be guided by purpose.
No, they're guided by the survival benefit. That's
guided one of the purposes.
No,
it's not a purpose.
They're able to procreate. If they're able to procreate, they pass on those genes. Those genes are important for the environment. Now, if they move to a different environment and they get destroyed because that different environment is incompatible with this new thing that evolved, then that's a problem, and that they'll get wiped out again.
I have a question for George. George, it sounds like you're defining survival as a purpose, basically.
Survival is a purpose. I mean, we're hardwired to, we're programmed to survive. That's one of our purposes. Another of our purposes is to seek pleasure, avoid pain.
Yeah, but there's evolution has no purpose of survival. Matter of fact, most things die in the process of evolution. It's a horrible process of killing, basically.
George, you're ascribing human values to chemistry, essentially.
No, I'm ascribing scientific values to a process.
No, so purpose isn't scientific value. Purpose and intent is not a scientific value. It's a human value.
Purpose is ubiquitous in science.
Value.
In science, purpose.
There's no
what are you
purpose
kidding?
to science.
There's purpose, like, for example, to human behavior. I mean, look at psychology, look at physiology.
Yeah, again, that's what I'm saying is you're assuming human values. You're assigning human values to chemistry. Ultimately, that's what you're doing.
The purpose of a Venus flytrap, the purpose is to capture food. There's purpose.
No, that's what it does. You're just what you're saying is just because it does it, that's its purpose.
Oh, come on. How could you say the purpose of the Venus flytrap isn't to capture food?
Because it evolved that way.
That's what it does. It's not a purpose.
But yes, that's what I'm saying. How could you say there's not purpose to that? Like, in other words, you're basically saying, like, human beings have purpose, but nothing else does.
No, I'm not actually not saying human beings have purpose. I disagree with many people here on that. But what I'm saying is what we assign as human values, we're assigning to other bits and pieces of chemistry.
How are you guys defining purpose?
I think human beings.
Hey guys, I'm gonna go downstairs and eat some food I have left down there, and just let you leave this on so you guys can continue, because you're having a good talk here, and I have some food to finish. So maybe you guys could close up the show whenever you're ready.
Well, we'll probably be here when you come back, Chandler.
Yeah, okay.
I only have a little bit longer, but
right.
Yeah, we've gone long enough.
Oh, are you guys think you're done, or?
Yeah,
well, we're
not discussing the subject anyway.
Well, we may have to revisit this in future episodes.
This is how we work. We start at one subject and then we just kind of
Oh yeah, we got way off topic of the original Afterlife topic, but we're going to have to do a series on this because we're not done. You guys are clearly not done discussing purpose and evolution, and this has been very interesting. So we may want to continue this in our future podcasts with this disagreement.
I think what we need is a session on confabulation.
Ooh, confabulation. I don't even know what that word means.
Basically, it means making stuff up after the fact.
I think we need a session on logic, Yuri.
Oh, man.
Confabulation.
Nah.
You guys are just too much.
Yeah, we'll definitely continue this discussion another time. I think, we're not going to agree, obviously, or at least at this point. But
at least not tonight.
We can make some headway on this, I think, and kind of, see if we can get a little closer to each other's positions and stuff like that. But
yeah.
To tie back to the life after death thing, I think we're kind of going off on the purpose thing, and then the purpose of the universe, and then whether that ties into, I guess, why there's an afterlife and things like that. So me and Yuri are saying, well, there's no ultimate purpose or meaning. There's only, and Yuri's saying there's not even purpose in humans. I'm saying there's obviously consciousness. Conscious humans have purposes and intentions, and that's the only thing we can apply that to. But,
yeah, and I think we're using the word purpose in different senses, and that is where a lot of the confusion comes from. So it could be just some of it is just semantics, really,
Right.
Yeah.
So if we learn that there's no need for an intention or purpose for the causal process of evolution for brains and consciousness to happen, then there's no need for the afterlife part as well, in my position. Whereas George's position is, since he believes that there's this purpose, that kind of translates over to why not an afterlife as well, So it's
well,
kind of
afterlife. It's just a belief. No, from my perspective, there's no empirical evidence. It just makes me feel better. So that belief is separate from the rest of this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so are you ready to close out this episode then?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay, so you've been listening to Philosophy, Science, and Religion, and we started out talking about, things like, is an afterlife possible? And somehow we got on to purpose and the evolution of wings, and I have no idea how that happened, but it was very funny listening to George, Trick, and Yuri argue about this. So I hope that I understand this better after I listen to it again, and I hope it made sense to our audience and that people learned something valuable from this exchange. And we will continue this in the future. As for now, thank you for listening and goodbye.